Chapter 10, March Madness 2. Ernest Hemingway appropriately wrote, "Wars are fought by the finest people that there are. The closer you are to where they are fighting, the finer people you meet." On March 8th and 9th, Lieutenant Strange dispatched search parties to locate PFC Patterson, but each passing moment deepened the mystery and the dread among his comrades. As word of the fruitless effort spread, a palpable anxiety gripped everyone, a silent terror that perhaps Patterson had fallen into enemy hands. The very mention of the possibility that he might be a POW stirred a mix of disbelief and anguish, leaving us all to confront the grim reality of a potential capture by the NVA. In whispered conversations and anxious glances over maps, Lieutenant Strange envisioned the worst. Every unconfirmed report or fading light on the horizon sparked a fresh wave of concern. The mere thought of Patterson enduring the brutal conditions of captivity as a POW was enough to send shudders down our spines. Even as we clung to hope, the specter of isolation and uncertainty haunted our daily routines, turning every quiet moment into a battleground of what-ifs and silent prayers for his safe return. Patterson's first night in the unforgiving jungle was nothing short of sheer terror. Every bruise and cut on his body throbbed with pain, a relentless reminder of the harrowing ordeal he had just endured. He knew that crying out for help would likely attract the attention of the NVA, the very last thing he wanted. The grim reality of his situation weighed heavily on his mind. It was a widely understood truth among the infantry that captured enlisted men were often shot on the spot. Instinctively, his heart raced with fear, and his thoughts spiraled into a dark abyss, but one flicker of hope remained: survival. As the mountain chill wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket, Patterson sought refuge beside a fallen tree. With trembling hands, he gathered leaves and dead jungle foliage, creating a makeshift cocoon to shield him from the elements and, more importantly, from prying eyes. Nestled in his leafy hideaway, he felt the weight of solitude pressing down on him, but he understood that evasion was his only lifeline. On the fateful morning of March 9th, a search patrol was spearheaded by Corporal James Harrison, a steadfast Marine hailing from Reseda, California. With an unwavering determination, he set out on a mission to find our missing man, PFC Patterson. James Harrison, a seasoned veteran with 8 months of combat experience in Vietnam, was only 19 years old. Yet he embodied the very spirit of a United States Marine, acutely aware that each passing moment diminished the chances of bringing Patterson home alive. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, tension thickened in the air. Before noon, an ambush erupted from the dense foliage, and chaos ensued as an NVA attack wounded the 2nd Squad's point man. Without hesitation, Corporal Harrison surged into action, racing to protect his wounded man. But fate had a cruel twist in store, and an AK-47 bullet found its mark. In that moment of bravery, Corporal Harrison fell, a hero who sacrificed everything in the pursuit of his mission, a Marine Corps creed: leave no man behind. The heartbreak of his loss cast a long shadow over 2nd Squad as they continued their search. Though grief-stricken, their resolve only deepened. They were not just searching for a fellow comrade. They were honoring the legacy of a leader who had given his life for theirs. As the afternoon wore on, the shadows grew longer, and the urgency of returning to base camp before darkness fell became intense. Just as hope began to wane, a figure emerged from the depths of the ravine below. It was PFC Patterson, waving frantically, a sight that ignited a flicker of joy amidst the sorrow. The jubilation of his rescue was bittersweet, overshadowed by the heavy sadness of losing Corporal Harrison. The air was thick with unspoken grief, a poignant reminder of the cost of their mission. After Dave received the medical care he desperately needed back at Vandegrift Combat Base, he didn't just return to our unit. He came back transformed, embodying the very spirit of resilience and determination. From that moment on, he became one of the most indispensable members of our team, a true cornerstone in the fabric of our unit. In the heat of battle, Dave was nothing short of fearless. You could always count on him to be the first one charging into the fray, ready to lend a hand to any Marine in need. His bravery transcended mere duty. It was a testament to his character and unwavering commitment to his brothers in arms. The pride I feel for him runs deep, and his journey, one marked by perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds, is a story that deserves to be told. It's a narrative filled with courage, brotherhood, and the relentless pursuit of hope, reminding us of the strength that lies within the human spirit. In a world where many would falter, Dave Patterson stood tall, a beacon of inspiration for us all. Any hope for a 4-day patrol plan was abandoned when the mission changed. Golf 2-4 was assigned the task of resecuring Catapult, a deserted fire base less than 5 miles south of the demilitarized zone that was held by the NVA. The battle to secure Catapult was as brutal as it was essential. Perched in a critical location below the DMZ, the abandoned landing zone held the key to unlocking a labyrinth of enemy trails in the upper Kamlo Valley. Marine Corps intelligence wasn't just whispering rumors, it shouted warnings. The enemy had entrenched themselves with a determination that spoke volumes. They were not merely transients, but a force that intended to linger. Under the resolute command of Captain Joseph M. Dwyer, Company G embarked on a mission that was as daunting as it was necessary, gearing up to wrestle control of this strategically vital point. Before the mission could be sealed, Catapult felt like a sleeping giant on the brink of awakening. Artillery and airstrikes pounded the enemy into retreat, herding them into the dense jungle surrounding the old firebase. The roar of the barrage was a grim overture to the impending Marine assault. As our CH-46 helicopters descended on the mountaintop, our hearts were pounding with anticipation. Once on the ground, there was no time to waste. Rations and ammunition were unloaded swiftly before manning the perimeter bunkers. The immediate aftermath was a surreal blend of cautious relief and bone-deep apprehension. Our boots touched the ground where the enemy had planned their defenses, and every familiar mark in the fighting holes whispered tales of past confrontations. With a profound sense of both history and urgency, we meticulously scoured each bunker for booby traps, a silent testament to the enemy's cunning. It wasn't merely a takeover, it was a reclaiming of both tactical advantage and the indomitable spirit of our unit. In that eerie stillness as we secured Catapult, we weren't just Marines following orders. We were guardians of a mission that would echo long after the smoke had cleared. On March 10th, our platoon cautiously descended a ridge southeast of the hilltop, moving with deliberate precision through the dense jungle. 2nd Platoon veered off on a trail northward, tasked with patrolling the opposite side of Catapult, while 3rd Platoon held the ground, securing the mountaintop. Every step forward carried the weight of impending danger, the thick air heavy with tension. I had been assigned to Walk Point, a duty that sent a wave of dread crashing through me. My gut churned, threatening to eject the meager breakfast rations I had forced down earlier, but there was no time for hesitation. The jungle was quiet, save for the rustling of leaves beneath our boots and the distant calls of monkeys and tropical birds. After nearly 2 grueling hours navigating the terrain, Joe Barbagallo took over point, allowing me a brief moment to collect myself. I followed about 10 yards behind him, my grip tight on my M16, every nerve on high alert. Then, without warning, Joe's rifle cracked through the silence, a single shot echoing through the trees like a lightning strike. Lieutenant Strange came sprinting up the trail, his face a mask of urgency. By the time we reached Joe, his eyes were wide as saucers, his voice a whisper. "There's a gook up there. I think I shot him." Lieutenant Strange pressed himself against a thick tree trunk, peering carefully ahead, scanning the dense foliage. His brow furrowed, and after a moment he murmured, "I don't see a damn thing. Are you sure you saw a gook, Barbagallo?" Joe swallowed hard, his hands gripping his rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I swear, sir, he was standing right there on the trail." He pointed about 20 yards in front of us, but the jungle seemed empty, silent and unyielding. Then, as if the trees themselves had come alive, the NVA unleashed hell upon us. Gunfire erupted from the undergrowth, a relentless barrage of small arms fire, mortars, and rocket-propelled grenades. The air filled with the deafening roar of explosions and the sharp, panicked cries of wounded Marines. 6 of our men went down in the initial onslaught, their bodies sprawled in the dirt as chaos swallowed the jungle. Lieutenant Strange wasted no time. He barked out orders, his voice cutting through the din of battle. First and second squads formed into a wedge assault, pushing forward with grim determination, while third squad trailed behind, ready to shift left or right to prevent an enemy flanking maneuver. We were locked in a brutal firefight, each second a desperate struggle to survive. The NVA had been waiting for us. They knew the terrain, using the jungle as both shield and weapon. The battle raged on for hours, the sun crawling across the sky as bullets tore through trees and bodies alike. Smoke and dust choked the air, and the acrid scent of gunpowder burned in our nostrils. We fought with everything we had, pushing forward inch by bloody inch. But just as suddenly as they had appeared, the NVA melted back into the jungle, vanishing like ghosts. The silence that followed was deafening, the aftermath of battle leaving only the moans of the wounded and the distant rustling of the wind through the trees. Gathering our injured, we made our way back to Catapult under the fading light, our bodies exhausted, our nerves frayed. That night, we stood perimeter watch on Catapult in the darkness, 2 awake at all times, weapons at the ready, knowing full well that the jungle never truly sleeps, only waits. On March 11th, we set out on patrol once more, moving along the southeast side of Catapult, skirting the remnants of the previous battle. The air was thick with the eerie stillness that often precedes trouble. Halfway up, as we ascended the mountain adjacent to Catapult, sporadic small arms fire crackled through the trees. It wasn't a full-scale engagement, but it was enough to put us on edge. As we pressed forward, Corporal Duke relinquished his position at point to Dino, our courageous scout, with an unshakable focus. Our immediate objective was clear: reach the mountain stream in the valley below, refill our empty canteens, and continue our patrol. But the North Vietnamese army had other plans. Unbeknownst to us, they had been waiting. Dug into fighting holes concealed within the dense jungle, the 247th NVA Regiment lay in wait. They were battle-hardened, methodical, and outnumbered us nearly 3-1. Their arsenal was formidable: machine guns, RPG grenade launchers, and even 60-millimeter mortars, all trained on our likely approach. They had set the perfect trap. It was PFC Bauer who first sensed something was wrong. A flicker of movement in the underbrush caught his sharp eyes, and he immediately called for Lieutenant Strange. The platoon froze, tension thick in the air. Lieutenant Strange rushed forward, assessing the situation in a heartbeat. He made a swift decision. We would form an offensive U-shaped formation, a tactic designed to protect our flanks and prevent the enemy from splitting us apart. Corporal Campbell's squad was placed on line for assault with machine gunners Greg Foster and Willie Brown providing cover support. Lance Corporal Duke's squad were divided to either side, ensuring we had flank coverage. Lieutenant Strange, our corpsman, Sergeant Greep, and the radio operator positioned themselves only steps behind. They were the nerve center of our formation. I found myself on the right flank, gripping my rifle, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then all hell broke loose. The NVA's first shots hit us with ruthless precision, sending shockwaves through our ranks. Dino and Lance Corporal Doyce Miller, a happy-go-lucky kid from Tyler, Texas, and PFC David Arnold, a kind-hearted Marine from Palatine, Illinois, were killed within minutes. Gunshots cut through the air in every direction. The jungle exploded with the deafening roar of AK-47 rifle fire. Trees splintered, branches rained down, and the acrid scent of gunpowder filled my nostrils. I'll never forget the moment fear and training collided in a heart-stopping, adrenaline-fueled frenzy. As I crouched behind a tree, my rifle at the ready, I knew I had to act fast. The enemy was overwhelming us, and every second counted. My mind racing, I relied on my earlier experience. Muscle memory took over, and I fired my rifle with precision, using the tree as a makeshift shield to protect myself from the hail of bullets. In that split second, I realized that fear can be a powerful motivator, but it's what you do with it that matters. You can let it paralyze you, or you can harness it to fuel your actions. I chose the latter. With each shot, I felt a surge of confidence and a sense of control. I was fighting back, and that realization was all I needed to keep pushing forward. The tree, once just a natural obstacle, had become my lifeline, a reminder that even in the most chaotic moments, there's always something to hold on to. Soon every grenade I carried was used to repel the fanatic NVA soldiers. In the chaos of battle, William Brown was struck and collapsed into the dirt ahead of us. Fueled by raw adrenaline, Greg Foster dashed from cover, sprinting through a hail of bullets to reach his friend. Lance Corporal Brown's neck lay gruesomely compromised, but he clung to the awareness that Foster was by his side. With his last breath, Brown murmured concern for his gun team, then slipped away in Foster's arms. Unshaken by the storm of lead around him, Greg Foster seized Lance Corporal Brown's M60 and unleashed a relentless barrage of fire upon the enemy. Miraculously, Foster remained unscathed. It was like God wrapped an invisible shield around him. With superhuman determination, he dragged Brown's body back to our lines before turning and doing the same for Doyce Miller. Though small in stature in that moment, Greg Foster possessed the strength and courage of 10 Marines. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Strange fought to keep the platoon together. Recognizing the overwhelming odds, he ordered a tactical retreat. 2 squads formed staggered lines parallel to the enemy, firing in coordinated bursts while the others retrieved the wounded and dead. The North Vietnamese saw our withdrawal and launched an aggressive counterattack, attempting to overwhelm us with sheer numbers. We countered with a concentrated wall of automatic rifle fire, executing a controlled retreat reminiscent of Revolutionary War tactics. Each squad emptied a full magazine before falling back behind the next, reloading as the next wave of fire covered them. It was a desperate strategy, but it worked. Lieutenant Strange called for artillery support from Neville. The response was swift, but not without tragedy. A short round landed dangerously close, wounding Lieutenant Strange in the leg. Unable to continue leading us, he passed command to Staff Sergeant Greep. The battle's momentum shifted yet again. The enemy, sensing an opportunity, unleashed everything they had: grenades, RPGs, and relentless small arms fire. The jungle turned into a nightmare of close-quarters combat, sometimes less than 5 meters between us and them. It was no longer just a fight to push forward. It was a fight to survive. Bill Juneau and Corporal Duke shouldered unwavering determination, holding their ground and returning fire with deadly precision. Gary Weiss, TJ, and Barbagallo and everyone else still able to fight matched their ferocity, alternating between unleashing gunfire and hurling grenades. Roger Morales seemed almost immortal, standing like an unshakable colossus, firing his machine gun from the hip with unrelenting fury. Chaos turned savage as wounded Marines stumbled through the mayhem, their faces dazed, blood seeping from wounds, many demanding urgent care. The scene unfolded like a nightmare, only this was all too real. Sergeant Greep, speaking urgently to Captain Dwyer over the radio, received orders to fall back and establish a defensive perimeter on the ridgeline behind us. He vowed to bring 2nd and 3rd platoons to reinforce our position as quickly as possible. 1st platoon had been nearly annihilated. Fewer than 20 of us remained unscathed, with the rest either wounded or dead. Yet even the injured fought on. Now Sergeant Greep had to hold the line long enough for Captain Dwyer to arrive. Once again, fate found me staring squarely at death. Sergeant Greep barked orders for PFC Gonzalez and me to hold our ground at a trailhead nestled at the foot of the mountain. Our mission? To dig a fighting hole behind a tangle of bushes and stall the enemy's counterattack. We set up a chain of 5 claymore mines along our entire front. In moments, it was just the two of us, isolated, terrified, and bracing for an onslaught by the NVA as our comrades scrambled upward. Sergeant Greep's final words rang in my ears. "Wait until you see the whites of their eyes before detonating those claymores, boys. Kill as many gooks as you can." Then silence enveloped us, where life flickered like a candle in the wind, waiting for the tempest to break. We watched our battered platoon claw back up the mountain. Their figures blurred into the haze as we wondered if dawn would ever find us intact. I'd love to recount the heroism of that day, yet all I remember is a raw, suffocating fear that my mind locked away. Picture 2 lone Marines pitted against an entire regiment of NVA. I weighed the odds of survival against capture as the jungle's cacophonous death chant surrounded us. Why had Sergeant Greep chosen us? How could we repel the fanatical onslaught of numbers that had overwhelmed us earlier? Then, with a grim gaze cast at my dog tags, the very symbol of my doomed identity, I confronted a brutal truth. I was not Dan Wagoner, son of Walt and Mildred Wagoner of Quincy, Illinois. I was 24811006, a mere number, ready to be discarded. 5 explosive claymore blasts thundered through the mountain, unmistakable to Sergeant Greep and the Marines of 1st Platoon. PFC Gonzalez and I scrambled back up the hill, darting through the chaos and somehow slipping into our lines without catching the errant glint of friendly fire. We had made it out alive. When we finally reached Sergeant Greep, his face wavered between shock and exasperation. Instead of a warm greeting, he barked, "How many did you take out?" Gonzalez and I exchanged incredulous glances before one of us shot back, "Hell if we know, Sergeant. We weren't about to stick around and count." Our Navy corpsman was a force of nature, his hands moving swiftly as he treated the wounded and orchestrated medevacs. To Marines, corpsmen were nothing short of gods, their skill and dedication often standing between us and death. That day, our battle-hardened medic was our guardian angel, performing his duty with the quiet heroism only those in the thick of war could truly appreciate. Waiting for battle to crash down upon you is almost worse than the fight itself. As we dug our fighting holes deeper, fear gripped every man. We knew we were outnumbered. What we didn't know was by how much. The whole scene felt surreal, like we had been dropped into an old TV western where the wagon train was surrounded by war-painted warriors. Their only hope was the cavalry. For us, that cavalry was Captain Dwyer and our 2 sister platoons. If you've ever seen that classic moment in a movie when the bugle sounds and salvation arrives, then maybe, just maybe, you'd understand the flood of relief I felt when familiar voices from 2nd Platoon broke through the tension. The instant Dan Wessler spotted me, you could see the weight lift from his shoulders. "There you are," he muttered, exhaling deeply. The feeling was mutual. Sergeant Gerald Rosier, the 2nd Platoon's brazen scout, wasn't exactly known for subtlety. With a booming voice that cut through the mountain air, He rallied his men by declaring, "First platoon got their ass kicked, so let's go get some payback, boys." The words, dripping with bravado, were meant to stoke a fire of defiance. Everyone knew he was as eager for vengeance as he was convinced of his own badassery, even if his wiry frame belied the larger-than-life persona he attempted to project. As Rosier and his lieutenant led his platoon down the treacherous trail, an uneasy mix of anticipation and dread permeated those of us from 1st Platoon who already knew the enemy. It wasn't long before they found themselves entrenched in an all-out firefight. The echoes of gunfire and shouts of defiance painted a picture of chaos that was both adrenaline-charged and grimly comical. Despite the sergeant's rallying cry, the harsh realities of the fight soon had 2nd Platoon facing defeat. Their bold charge ended with them limping back up the mountain to us, defeated and disheartened, while the enemy quietly regrouped for what promised to be another relentless assault. Captain Dwyer's eyes lit up with that unmistakable determination. He knew that air and artillery support were our best shot at seizing victory. His plan wasn't a typical all-out maneuver, the kind where every asset is thrown into the fray. Instead, it was a strategic cocktail of precision and power. Fully recognizing our precarious situation, yet still determined to fight, we watched from our defensive perimeter, hearts pounding, convinced that our captain was about to turn the tide. The calm was suddenly shattered by the relentless pounding of our artillery, its booming cadence rattling the enemy lines below. Just when we started feeling the weight of silence on our shoulders, the sky erupted with the roar of multiple F-4 Skyhawk fighter jets. These magnificent pilots swooped in and unleashed napalm bombs, igniting a hellstorm that danced fireballs over the enemy ranks. The chaos below transformed into a pyrotechnic display of strategic brilliance. Amidst the explosive spectacle, we grinned in disbelief, a mix of wonder and relief, as our air and artillery support meticulously carved out our escape. For the first time in hours, we were allowed a deep collective exhale. The cacophony of battle had given way to the comforting hum of a coordinated defense, and we cheered our allies who were turning what seemed like a desperate situation into a tactical masterpiece. In that electrifying moment, with danger looming large and every sound echoing our shared courage, we experienced a fleeting taste of hope. But the day was not over. Captain Dwyer's voice cut through the static of the radio like a trumpet call in the gathering gloom. A vital message had come in. The NVA were beginning to regroup on the hill that lay like a dark sentinel between us and our home base. As the daylight dwindled into a reluctant twilight, every second pulsed with urgency. It wasn't enough to simply pull back. We had to brave the enemy again and forge our way to catapult. At the base of the corresponding hill, tension electrified the air. We braced ourselves, bayonets fixed, ready to storm upward. Captain Dwyer, with the calm precision that had become his trademark, orchestrated a piercing artillery barrage aimed right at the summit. His strategy was nothing short of masterful. As the explosions rocked the hilltop, the enemy splintered and scattered like leaves in a storm. For a fleeting moment, victory seemed within our grasp. Yet fate has a way of twisting triumph into tragedy. As we steadily advanced to the summit, artillery shells intended to land behind the hilltop on receding enemy faltered unpredictably, hurtling instead into the canopy of trees above us. When one of these stray rounds detonated, it shattered the fragile sense of safety like glass underfoot. In the chaos, PFC Gary Weiss and I dove into a massive crater, its jagged edges offering a temporary haven. There, 3 brave Marines, who had already found refuge, their silhouettes huddled together against the madness. Recognizing that staying put might soon be as dangerous as advancing, Gary Weiss urged a bold new plan. Him and I should leave the crater and rendezvous with our squad positioned on the west side of the hill. No sooner had our plan crystallized, calamity struck. Barely 20 yards from the supposed safety of our crater shelter, an artillery round found its mark with devastating precision. In that single catastrophic moment, Lance Corporal Michael DeGeno from Hurlock, Maryland, Lance Corporal Gene Clemencia, and Private First Class Julio Weld from New Orleans, Louisiana, were lost to the mercy of fate, their lives extinguished in an instant. Returning to the crater to attempt any form of rescue, we were met by a scene that defied description, bodies tangled and distorted beyond recognition, a heart-rending testament to the brutality of war. It was a picture Gary and I share today with hushed breath, haunting and indescribable. In the heavy darkness of that night, a cold, grim certainty settled over me. I wouldn't be coming home. And in that silent, shared understanding, I saw the same resignation reflected in Gary's eyes. How could we endure 13 unforgiving months in this relentless abyss of death? We clung to our fleeting humanity, wondering how anyone could continue to survive when the very landscape of life had been marred by such merciless devastation. For the next week, after days of mostly brief yet sometimes intense firefights, Golf Company finally secured the area around Catapult. Or so we thought. The NVA would soon seek revenge. As Golf Company advanced through relentless search and destroy missions, the jungle's dense foliage concealed chilling secrets. Enemy bunkers emerged from the shadows, whispering tales of treachery, each one laden with ominous discoveries. 50-pound sacks of rice stood in silent readiness, flanked by caches of weapons, SKS rifles, mortars, and a sinister array of Chi-Com grenades and booby traps. Grim reminders of the brutal conflict surfaced as well, freshly dug graves of NVA soldiers and haunting body counts that spoke of the fierce, unyielding firefights. The evening of March 15th, I managed to visit Dan Wessler and spend some quality time together. It was good to be with my friend again, and we both had a lot to discuss about our recent adventures. Dan told me that he had helped carry the dead men from my platoon back to Catapult. The experience left him distraught and would be etched in his memory forever. It was determined by our superiors to use Marines from separate platoons to do this grim task. It was hard enough to do in itself, let alone dealing with it when it was the man fighting next to you. Nonetheless, Dan was very emotional about the experience. The grim task of body retrieval was hardly discussed during our training, and I don't think any of us were prepared for the trauma of the event. When Dan shared the harrowing experience, the air around us thickened with unspoken sorrow. His voice trembled, each word a testament to the emotional weight resting heavily on his shoulders. It's a duty we'd all might face, yet nothing could prepare us for the raw reality of seeing lifeless comrades. Amidst the chaos and noise of war, body retrieval often lingered in the shadows, sparsely discussed yet ever present in the corners of our minds.
Wags, I need to share something with you, brother.
Dan began, the gravity of his words hanging like a dark cloud. As I listened, I could feel the unease radiating from him, a premonition that marked him for a fate he believed was sealed. The haunting thought that his days were numbered pressed against us like an unseen enemy, even in moments of camaraderie.
I don't think I'm making it home from this, pal. I've always known it. Always.
What a heavy statement to carry, one that seemed to echo in the silence left by those we'd lost. Despite our shared mourning, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. We both made it through this shit last week, didn't we? Neither of us has a scratch. Yet, Wessler's conviction held firm. Dan's belief that destiny had other plans for him was both sobering and surreal, a reminder of how fragile life could be in the throes of war. With as much cheerfulness as I could muster, I whispered, "Great seeing you again, Wessler. Now quit worrying, things will be fine." I was blatantly hiding my own anxiety as my heart wrestled with the truth of his fears. As Dan Wessler prepared to write a letter home, an act laden with unexpressed fears and heartfelt love. I couldn't shake the sense that his words would be more than just ink on paper. They would encapsulate the spirit of a scared Marine facing an uncertain future.
March 15th, 1969. Dear Mom and Dad, I've been on an OP since February 28th. I got your package, thanks a lot. We've been without food and drink rainwater for 4 days. I hope they can get some in today. If they do, I can mail this letter. We have 7 dead bodies, ours, laying on the LZ waiting for the clouds to break so a chopper can land. I'm fine, but I think I'm 10 years older after carrying those bodies up the hill in a bag. Well, anyway, I'm point man now. I don't carry a blooper anymore. The point man was killed. Well, this is just a note. I'll write all when this shit is over. Today is our 16th day. Love, Dan, send more fruit.
On the morning of March 19th, Dan Wessler walked point for 2nd Platoon, leading a patrol southwest from Catapult back down the trail toward the same area where we had been attacked by the NVA the week prior. That same morning, I walked point man for 1st Platoon, moving northeast the opposite direction. Both patrols were part of our daily search and destroy missions, yet nothing about that day would be routine. The night before, Captain Dwyer had gathered his platoon leaders at his command post, methodically assigning each lieutenant to its respective patrol route. A simple decision, one that sent Dan Wessler south while I headed north. Fate had made its choice. Once again, death would pass me by, but at an immeasurable cost, leaving me to wrestle with the tormenting question, why him, not me? We had barely covered less than 500 yards when 2 horrific explosions shattered the morning silence behind us. A split second later, the distant, chilling staccato of pop, pop, pop small arms fire. 2nd Platoon was in trouble. Without hesitation, we turned and sprinted toward the sounds of battle, desperate to reach our comrades. When we arrived, the firefight was still raging. It was happening in the exact location where we had fought on March 11th. Dan's platoon had been ambushed. The enemy had hidden 3 claymore mines in the underbrush, strategically placed at head and knee level to maximize destruction. The first explosion tore into Lance Corporal Ronnie Eckenrode from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. The second blast claimed 2nd Lieutenant Anthony Giretti, a bold, steadfast leader admired throughout Golf Company for his bravery in past engagements. Amid the chaos, Private First Class Dan Wessler refused to let fear dictate his actions. Ignoring the peril, he crawled across the exposed, fire-swept terrain, determined to aid his fallen brothers. As he reached them, a 3rd anti-personnel mine detonated. The blast killed him instantly. His courage, his selflessness in the face of certain death, became the rallying force that drove his remaining squad to keep fighting. Sergeant Greep ordered us to recover the fallen, a grim task, one that still plays havoc with my mind. When we reached Dan Wessler's body, I collapsed to my knees, overcome by grief. I wept, unable to contain the anguish that surged through me. Several of us carefully lifted Dan's body onto a poncho, and together we carried him back to Catapult. He was laid, a poncho over his body, in the very spot where, the night before, he had wrestled with his own fears. Only now, the cruel reality had unfolded before my eyes. I couldn't bear to leave him behind. But Joe, sensing my torment, gently pulled me away, reminding me that our duty wasn't over. Returning to the ambush site, I was a broken man. Tears streamed down my face, and for the first time I didn't care about the war, the mission, or even survival. Marines are trained to be tough, to stay sharp and vigilant, but my grief had shattered me. Captain Dwyer must have seen it, the way I was unraveling. In the heat of battle, a man lost in sorrow is a liability. Without warning, he grabbed my collar and slapped me hard across the face. "You've got to snap to, Marine. If you don't get your shit together, You're going to get someone killed. Do you understand me, son?" I stared at him, lost in shock. But then something clicked. The captain was right. I had to pull myself together. I had to be there for the others. War does not wait for grief. It does not allow time for mourning. I had to keep fighting. Captain Dwyer, still unconvinced I was fully recovered, made a snap decision. I was to head back to Catapult and bring back as many grenades as fast as I could run. Alone, still mourning Dan Wessler, I was sprinting back to the base camp, adrenaline pumping, every nerve on edge. There was no time to waste. I grabbed every grenade I could find, stuffing them into a backpack and cramming more into my 2 gas mask pouches. Loaded down like a walking arsenal, I turned back toward the fight. As I made my way back, the trail suddenly split into a Y. Do I go left or right? My mind raced, trying to recall which way I had come from. Neither direction looked immediately familiar, but I had to make a choice before I wasted precious time. Trusting my gut, I veered left. The path looked more traveled, sloping downward toward the river, our objective. Then came the steep section. Before I knew it, I was sliding down like I'd been shot out of a cannon, kicking up dirt and leaves as I struggled to slow my descent. Just as I was regaining my footing, I heard voices. Vietnamese voices. My blood ran cold. I looked up, and there they were, 5, maybe 6 North Vietnamese soldiers, staring at me with the same wide-eyed shock I must have been giving them. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Then, in a move that defies all logic, they bolted into the jungle. No hesitation, no attempt to fight, just gone. Without thinking, my hands moved on their own. I ripped grenades from my pack and hurled them, one after another, sending them exploding into the trees where the NVA had disappeared. I didn't stop to question why they had run. Looking back now, I realized they must have thought artillery or mortar fire was coming. It was a common tactic for them to hug American positions after a firefight to avoid being shelled. But in that moment, all I knew was that I had no intention of sticking around to see if they changed their minds. I turned and sprinted back up the trail, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I hit the steep incline. My boots scrabbled for traction, but the loose dirt betrayed me. I slipped, tried again, slipped again. Panic clawed at my throat. If they decided to come after me, I was a sitting duck. Somehow, through sheer desperation, I clawed my way up that slope, gasping for breath as I finally reached the top. Only when I was certain I was clear did I allow myself to process what had just happened. If they hadn't ran away, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. I think a part of my soul was taken that March day, losing Dan Wessler. The loss of my best friend in the Vietnam War is a wound that time has not fully healed. Dan was more than just a companion through the highs and lows of life. He was a beacon of integrity and kindness. Every memory we shared still echoes in my heart, from our youthful adventures to the quiet moments of understanding that needed no words. The grim reality of war stole him away, leaving behind a void that words struggle to fill. He was a good friend and the finest person I have ever known in my life. Dan's warmth and unwavering spirit made him a unique light in a dark world. If he had lived through Vietnam, he surely would have made the world a better place. I often imagine the positive impact he would have had, not just as a hero on the battlefield, but as someone who could have been a nurturing presence at home. His potential as a loving husband, a devoted father, and a caring grandfather was immense, and imagining what our family gatherings might have been like fills me with both sorrow and gratitude for the time we did share. In war, all glory is trumped by sacrifice, and this sacrifice is much too infinite to possibly understand. The echo of that sacrifice reverberates through every day I live. While Dan's absence is a constant reminder of the costs of conflict, his legacy of compassion and courage continues to inspire me. Every step I take is a tribute to his memory, a reminder to honor the dear friend who gave his life for our country and whose spirit continues to guide me even in the midst of lingering grief. As Hemingway penned, "Wars are fought by the finest people that there are." Nearly 3 decades had drifted away since Dan Wessler's untimely departure from this world, yet the memories of our friendship forged amidst the chaos of Vietnam lingered like a bittersweet melody, echoing in the chambers of my heart. It took me what felt like an eternity to muster the courage to reach out to his family, but with a heart racing in a mix of anticipation and trepidation, I finally dialed the number. As fate would have it, Dan's father had passed away, but his mother was still vibrant and eager to reconnect. The moment she answered, warmth radiated from her voice, as if the years melted away in an instant. I introduced myself as a close friend of Dan's from our time in Vietnam, and as I spoke, I poured my heart into conveying the profound impact his friendship had on my life, how his laughter could illuminate even the darkest days, and how his unyielding spirit inspired everyone around him. With a hopeful heart, I asked if she could send me a picture of Dan, a tangible piece of him to hold close. What came next sent a shiver of reverence down my spine. Dan's mother unveiled a haunting story that had nestled in her heart for years.
Before he even set foot in Vietnam, my son had a chilling premonition that his life would be cut short. It took me months after his death to summon the strength to sift through his belongings. While going through his things, I stumbled upon a poem he penned back in high school, tucked away in a drawer. I can't bear to read it aloud to you over the phone, but I promise to send you a copy along with Dan's picture.
The Truth by Dan Wessler. July 5th, 1967. With a shooting star and a flash of light, that makes the perished murk of night, and all around a calm shall sin, and all shall recall what he has been. In his life, deceitful, unfair, and torn. His after, though outset, from the time that he was born, with the assertion that someone would reappear. And all shall know that time is here.